Good evening and welcome back to Answers on Eschatology. We are in video number 18 in our study of the prophets and the parables. And if you're just joining us, we've been focusing throughout this series how Jesus, in his parables, draws from the prophets, pulls the context and the history of those passages, redefines the characters, and interprets them to explain what he's doing in the last days generation, that is, in his generation, for both the salvation of the righteous and the judgment of the enemies of God. And throughout his parables, and as we'll see again this evening, Jesus consistently redefines the characters of Old Testament prophecy to be, number one, he has become himself the King of Israel. He has become Yahweh of the Old Testament. Number two, his followers, the church, have become the righteous remnant of Israel, the true Israel, that he is redeeming in the last days. And number three, Old Covenant Israel, who has rejected him, the chief cornerstone, has become the enemies of Jehovah, who is persecuting his church, the true people of God, who he is about to destroy at his parousia in that generation. Let's take a look at this again in Matthew 21, a beautiful passage in prophecy that communicates these very truths, and we see this in Matthew 21:44 as it alludes, or as Jesus alludes in this verse to Isaiah chapter 8. Watch this. Matthew 21:44 says this, "And he who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, but on whomever it falls, it will scatter him like dust." Again, a direct allusion to Isaiah 8:14-15. Listen to this. "Then he will become a sanctuary, but to both houses of Israel, a stone to strike and a rock to stumble over, and a snare and a trap for the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Many will stumble over them, then they will fall and be broken. They will even be snared and caught." Now, on the surface of these passages, the application is simple once again. In Isaiah's day, judgment was coming, that is, destruction was coming upon the northern kingdom of Israel, and it would also come upon the southern kingdom later on. But those who would be faithful, those who would put their trust in Jehovah, he would become to them a sanctuary. But those who would not, those who would refuse to put their faith in God and put their faith in the temple, would put their faith in Assyria, etc., that stone, Jehovah himself would crush and grind them to powder. Jesus again applies that to his first century generation, as that is exactly what was taking place. He was establishing a kingdom and a temple, and he was bringing their new covenant. Those who would put their faith in him would be saved. He would become literally to them the sanctuary, the new covenant temple, and those who would not, he himself would come in judgment and crush them to powder. But there's more. By drawing and getting into the context of Isaiah 8, we understand more of what Jesus was communicating. Specifically, let's turn to Isaiah chapter 8. And in verse 18, Isaiah says this interesting phrase. Watch this. Isaiah says, now this is following verses 7 and 8, his prophecies concerning judgment of both kingdoms and the restoration of the remnant. He says, "Behold, I and the children whom the Lord has given to me are for signs and wonders in Israel from the Lord of hosts who dwells on Mount Zion." In other words, he and his children are symbolically demonstrating something. They're for signs and wonders, specifically in the context of these passages and this prophecy. Now, in Isaiah 7 verse 1, notice this. It says this: "It came about in the days of Ahaz," that was the king of Judah, son of Jotham, the son of Uzziah, king of Judah. I could have just read that and you would have got that. "That Rezin, the king of Aram, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, king of Israel, went up to Jerusalem to wage war against it, but could not conquer it." Let's just jump to verse 3. "Then the Lord said to Isaiah, Go now out to meet Ahaz and your son, Shear-Jashub, at the end of the conduit of the upper pool on the highway to the Fuller's Gate." So, long story short, Isaiah with his son, remember, who is assigned to Israel, goes out to meet King Ahaz and basically tells him, "Don't worry, I'm going to protect you, but judgment will come upon your kingdom as well, yet a remnant will be saved." But here's the point about the son. Isaiah's son, Shear-Jashub, means a remnant shall return. In other words, this prophecy that I'm bringing you, this judgment that is going to come upon you, it will result in the return of a remnant. Remember, the children are for signs and wonders for Israel. A remnant will return. We go to Isaiah chapter 8, the very next chapter where this prophecy continues, and God tells, he told Judah, the king of Israel, back in Isaiah 7, that he was going to give him a sign of his immediate deliverance from the judgment and from the destruction of the northern kingdom that was coming upon him. In Isaiah 8, the son is born, the sign is given, Jehovah will deliver Judah from the northern kingdom, yet eventually judgment will come and a remnant will be saved, and the son's name is Maher Shalal Hashbaz. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I have no clue. But it means swift is the booty, speedy is the prey. And again, that son was a sign to Israel. It was a sign that the judgment of Assyria was coming upon the northern kingdom of Israel swiftly, and it would destroy them. It would take all their booty. It would completely scatter them, and Judah would be temporarily spared. So, in the context of this imminent judgment of the northern kingdom, the future judgment of the southern kingdom, through which a remnant would be saved, the message is through the signs of Isaiah's sons that through this imminent and speedy judgment that would take all the booty of Israel, a remnant will be saved. And it's in that context that Jesus draws from Isaiah 8:14 through 15. They were, as the remnant, to put their faith in Jehovah. Throughout all of this turmoil, throughout all of this judgment, they were to put their faith in God. And if they would, Isaiah 8:14, he will become to them, who? To the remnant who put their faith in Jehovah, a sanctuary. In other words, don't fear the judgment. Don't fear the northern kingdom. Don't fear Assyria. Don't fear Samaria. But if you put your faith in Jehovah and in his covenant and in his promises, this swift judgment will lead to a remnant being saved. That's the message of Jesus the Messiah in his first century generation. He's telling his audience, he's telling the Jews of his generation, judgment's coming. Both northern and southern kingdoms are going to be judged. All Israel is going to be judged. But for the remnant who puts their faith in the rock, in the stone, who the builders are rejecting, to them he will become a sanctuary. They will be delivered. They will become the remnant who are being saved. But those who don't, i.e. Old Covenant Israel, who is rejecting the rock, they will be swept away by the judgment of God that was coming upon them in their generation. I hope that made sense. Listen, there's so much going on in Isaiah 8, 7 through 8, and all these allusions. I can only get to so much in 10 minutes, but Jesus is redefining through this allusion, through this context that he's pulling into his generation, that number one, he is coming as the stone that the builders rejected, as Jehovah, the foundation, the temple of his new covenant people. And those who put their faith in him have become the righteous remnant of Israel that he's redeeming. And those who will not are like are like Samaria and Judah of old, who see judgment coming but refuse to submit to the word of Jehovah, to the word of his prophets, and as a result, they will be judged in that judgment and destroyed. That's it for tonight. We'll see you next time on Answers on Eschatology. We'll jump into the last Old Testament source that Jesus draws from in Matthew 21:44, which is Daniel chapter 2, 33 through 35, the coming of the stone that grinds the enemies of Jehovah to dust and grinds them like powder. We'll see you next time. We'll pick it up on Answers on Eschatology. Have a great week. We'll see you in a couple days. Bye for now.